Hey guys, welcome back to Fantasy Tips. My name is Julian, and in today's episode, we're going to talk about 10 things that you shouldn't be doing on your draft day. 10 common draft day mistakes. Before we get started, guys, please leave a like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. I'm trying to get to 1,000 subscribers this year, so your support is really appreciated. So without further ado, guys, we're going to jump into our first draft day mistake, and this is a pretty big one. It's one that a lot of people tend to make, and I see it all the time, and that's drafting a player because he was amazing for you last year. Things change in the NHL. Teams acquire new defensemen, new forwards, and players are pushed down the depth chart. So player that did well last year isn't necessarily going to do well again this year. Use what information I'm providing you on this channel to make an educated decision, and don't just pick players based on how they performed in a prior year. A good example of that is Tony DeAngelo. 2 seasons ago, he was unbelievable. Last year, he played 5 games. That's a bit of an extreme example, but it is something that happens very frequently. Another big mistake that I see people making is drafting too many centers. The reason for this is you only usually in standard leagues have 2 slots for a center and maybe a utility spot. You want to draft forwards that can fit in all your spots, right? You're not going to draft a whole bunch of centers and leave your left wing and right wings basically blank. You want to have basically the same amount of centers, left wing, and right wing. That way, when the player's not playing, you have some room to move in your lineup, to replace that player instead of having a whole bunch of centers that are just never going to play. This obviously applies to other positions too. Don't draft 7 defensemen. Don't draft, a whole bunch of left wingers. It just doesn't make any sense. My next tip is don't draft a player just to make a cool team name. I've seen people do this, and it's so silly. I know it's tempting to draft Jacob Trouba to make a team name called I Knew You Were Trouba, but really, it's Jacob Trouba's probably not the best player to draft this year. He's probably second on the depth chart in New York. He's probably not the worst pick in the world, like really late in the draft, but don't go reaching for a guy just to make a cool team name. Next mistake that a lot of people tend to make, and it's not the biggest mistake in the world, but it's definitely one that can have a big impact on your season, is drafting goalies too early or too late. There's kind of a sweet spot when you want to draft your goalies. Right now, Vasilevskiy is a goalie going in the first round. Is he necessarily worth it? I'm not sure. There's a lot of really good goalies going pretty late in the draft. Obviously aren't going to do as well as him, but you're going to miss out on a top-tier forward if you're picking Vasilevskiy 5th overall like he's going right now. So it might not be worth grabbing goalies so early. And there's some really great goalies that are ranked really late right now, like Tristan Jarry and Jacob Markstrom, that are going to get the vast majority of their team starts and will cost you a way later pick. Another big mistake is not understanding how your draft room works. Know your platform. If you're new to a platform, whether it be Yahoo, ESPN, or whatever you're using, do a mock draft or two to prepare, to make sure you know what you're doing, to make sure you know all the ins and outs of your draft software. This way, when you're actually drafting, you're not trying to figure out what the hell to do. You're like, oh no, I don't know how to search for this. I don't know how to filter for this. At that point, it may be too late. You only usually have a minute to a minute and a half to draft in most sites, so you want to know what you're doing. Another mistake that a lot of people tend to make is drafting too many high-risk, high-reward players. For example, rookies. Like, you don't want to draft a ridiculous amount of rookies because a lot of rookies don't end up panning out. So you don't want to be that guy who drafts too many of them. And if you're drafting a lot of high-risk, high-reward players early on in the draft, when you could easily have taken safe guys who are going to get you a lot of points, is probably not the best idea. I tend to take high-risk, high-reward players right near the end of the draft because at that point, you're not getting that great quality of players anyway. Another mistake that I see people make is drafting too many players from the same team. I have a buddy who's a Leaf fan, and he tends to draft a full team almost of Leafs and Devils players, and it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. What about on the nights where the Leafs and the Devils aren't playing? You got no one in your lineup, basically, and when the Devils and Leafs are both playing, your lineup is probably likely full, right? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. You want to have players from a bunch of different teams. That way you have, some maneuverability and you maximize the amount of games that you play every single night. Also, if a specific team like the Leafs go cold, well, suddenly your fantasy team is automatically shafted. Whereas if you have players from a bunch of different teams Who cares if the Leafs go cold? You have only 1 or 2 players from the Leafs. The rest of your team can handle that. My next big drafting mistake is drafting name value players ahead of their real value. An example of that is Andrei Vasilevskiy, right? He's someone who's being drafted 5th overall really early in the first round. Is it necessarily worth grabbing a goalie that early? Probably not, in my opinion. It's not the worst decision in the world, but that's not something I would do. His name value makes him go up really high and not necessarily worth it, even though he is probably going to be the best goalie in the league in fantasy. The same thing goes with a guy like Jack Eichel. Right now, he's on Buffalo. He's not going to end up playing for Buffalo. He hasn't gotten traded, and he's ranked in like the 48, like around 48, and that's absurd because who the hell knows what's going to happen with him if he's even going to play this year? Like, we don't know what's going to happen. So drafting a guy like that way too high just doesn't make sense. Next one, number 9, is simply not being prepared for your draft. I'm here. I'm going to release a whole bunch of videos to get you guys as prepared as possible for your fantasy drafts, guys. That's what I'm here for. I'm going to put all the information, and that way you guys can make an educated decision on who to draft each and every round. And that way you guys can end up with the best team possible. So tune in here to Fantasy Tip, and I will definitely provide you with a video almost every single day of this off season. And the last one is kind of a big one, and that's forgetting your draft time. And that's happened to basically everyone I know. Put it in your calendar, guys. Set an alarm. Do whatever you have to do to make sure you're drafting your team and you're not auto-drafting. Because auto-draft, well, it's not the worst thing in the world. It's not going to get you the best team. And while it's still possible to win with an auto-drafted team, it's not very likely. And that's it, guys. You've reached the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching all the way through. Please leave a like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, leave a comment down below. Let me know if you enjoyed the video. Let me know what kind of videos you guys want to see before the season starts, kind of videos you guys want me to help you with your drafts. Let me know. Until next time, guys, stay safe, stay healthy, and I'll catch you in the next episode of Fantasy Tip.